All right, welcome to ex-vicarious. I'm Braith, and today I'm joined by Jeff. He's going to help me introduce what ex-vicarious is today, why I've started this podcast, and we're going to also delve into a little bit about Jeff himself, his journey to becoming a doctor, building catalyst chemistry, and how we've met and become friends along the way. So, how are you going today, Jeff?
Not too bad yourself.
Yeah, doing great. Really excited for this episode, actually. The thing is, since I started my blog, I've always wanted to start a podcast and I told people about it, but Jeff was the one who consistently pushed me a lot to start it. So, I mean, here we are together. So I just felt like it was perfect timing for that. But yeah, I'll hand it over to you now to break it down and interrogate me.
Yeah, for sure. So I think it was a good few months ago when you first mentioned maybe you're thinking about a podcast and then pushing you to get there. But first of all, I'd like
Yeah.
to say it's a pleasure to be here. You've had some amazing guests on your blog already, so I feel pretty small compared to the giants you've had on. As I was just saying, the podcast didn't start overnight. So what is ex-vicarious for those who are just tuning in now? What's the concept and sort of why should we care?
Yeah, well, yeah, thanks. Thank you so much for pushing me in and super excited to chat about it with you. Basically, ex vicarious, well, to explain it, we should probably go into what vicarious as a word means. So, to live vicariously is to live through the actions or success of someone else. So, it's when you get satisfaction or fulfillment by seeing how other people are achieving the things you want to do, how they're achieving your dreams, your goals, whatever your ambitions are, and seeing all the good that's coming out of that and seeing how they're living that life and just feeling fulfilled based on that. Ex vicarious is the complete opposite. It's about stop watching and start doing. Make those dreams come true for yourself. And it's like the story of how it actually came to be is around year 10, I started making music while I was at North Sydney Boys. And North Sydney Boys is like not typically the type of school where many people would be doing like rap music. The main focus is just get as good marks as you can for HSC. So I basically only had one other mate doing it with me, Anders. And yeah, it was a really good experience. But the whole journey for that was instead of just looking at my favorite artists, enjoying their music, enjoying everything that they get to do because they create music and watching TV shows of like my favorite characters. Instead of just doing that every day, I decided, you know what, like I love music, I may as well start making it myself. And yeah, from that day forward, I used to say fuck vicarious because like that it's just really about getting rid of that mindset that it's fine to watch other people do everything you want, because I honestly don't think it's fine, because how are you ever going to feel truly fulfilled in life if you don't give it a go yourself? So that's where it all started. And just last year, end of last year, I started a blog called Ex Vicarious with a very similar mindset ingrained into it. And I thought it would be really cool to actually interview people who have used a similar sort of mindset where they've put themselves out there in the world instead of watching others and actually made something of themselves that impacts not only them as a person, but impacts their community or the world overall. And yeah, so that's why I started a blog. It turned into like a Q&A that I mostly post on LinkedIn and also on my website still. And it's always been leading up to a podcast where I can actually share the conversations that I had with these people in the video format rather than just writing about it afterwards. So yeah, that's what Ex Vicarious is all about and the journey that I've taken to start the podcast.
Awesome. So it's like about a six year history, isn't it? From like year 10 to now.
Yeah, I guess so. That's the maths if we've done it
Yeah.
correctly. But yeah, I think it's been quite a while. The focus beforehand was very much creative and artistic focus, because when you're at North Sydney Boys and everyone's just focused on studying, I felt that it didn't really make sense to be trying to do music because it just goes against what everyone else is doing. But once you start doing it, because less people in selected schools are doing that, then it actually gains a lot of traction quickly, because it is something like a little bit more different, and other people are interested in music as well, then they see that and they might give it a go themselves as well. So it started from that if we take it all the way back to the 6 years. But yeah, it's just kind of shifted towards looking at people who they may be founders that, started their own company, could be creators, any sort of creator, whether it be a content creator, filmmaker, etc., and just game changers in general. And what I mean by game changers is people who try to change the world in some way or change their community in some way, try to do things differently to inspire positive change in some aspect.
Awesome. Just on that idea of stepping out and being different, because obviously doing music in high school, that was like a big movement against the gradient. What was your sort of mindset shift that started that all? Because it doesn't just happen like that, from my understanding. What
Yeah.
would have happened?
Yeah. So the mindset shift was just that I was unhappy. I was trying hard at school, putting in heaps of time. And I think around the same time, I was actually doing an accelerated course called ITP. So it's like information technology. So basically, the accelerated course is when you're in year 9 and 10, you're doing a HSC course. So the 2 units for that course can actually go towards your HSC mark, your ATAR. And if it does perform well, then you can use that instead of one of the subjects you do in year 12. So it kind of gives you a little bit of a buffer. But yeah, like I definitely didn't enjoy it. I tried really hard and I put the time in. I did it properly, but I definitely didn't enjoy it. And that kind of epitomized like how I was feeling at the time. I was doing a lot of things where I felt like I had to do it, and that's just the environment that I was in. That's like the expectations, but it wasn't something that brought me any fulfillment or happiness or excitement. So over time, I realized in order to be happy, it would make sense to do something that I'm passionate about. I've always liked music a lot and actually put a lot more time into creating playlists like Spotify playlists back in the day. So that was pretty funny. Like I'll just try to create like the best playlist possible, even if no one was listening. And then like over time, I figured out a way to structure them in a way and change the heading and subtitles to a way that a lot of people would find it and start following the playlist. And from there, it just started like a bigger passion of, okay, like I love this music. I like rapping along to my favorite rappers. Why don't I try to make some of my own? And yeah, the mindset shift was catalyzed by being unhappy, wanting to change that state, trying to find some sort of excitement and just giving it a go. So I think the first time I ever did a cover was actually on one of my personal, like private Instagram accounts, which I don't even have access to anymore. Just forgot the password. But yeah, it was like I think it was a Juice World cover of Robbery, which I did on guitar. And I had a really small account. It was only like 200 followers or less, but it got like a lot of comments, a lot of likes, and the people, just my friends at the time, like supported me for it. So it was just something I tried. I never decided like I actually want to do music, but I just put a cover out there. It got more support than I expected. So then I was like, okay, what if I just make a music account? And then I created a public account called Nulzy. And yeah, I've used that account ever since. So yeah, it's a mindset shift just started from being unhappy, giving something a go, getting feedback, getting some more motivation to give it a proper shot. And since then, everything you try, like starting that new account, putting real music out there, it just helps change that mindset because the feedback you get from the world is that when you're putting time into your passions, people are getting something positive from it or they're enjoying it. So yeah, that's basically how the mindset shift happened over time.
Makes sense. And just to lead on from after that, because we now we've started, you've sort of been doing this for a while. Can you just describe the process of what you've been doing with people on your blog for people who are also tuning in now? What have you been
Yeah.
doing until now?
Yeah. So the first blog I did was the first written blog of a person that I interviewed was with Dan Brockwell from Early Work. So it was really exciting, to be honest, that before I did any interview blogs, he actually accepted my message, just a cold outreach to ask if he wanted to hop on and have a chat and have me write about his story building Early Work and everything that's led up to it, explore his mindsets and habits. So from there, I was just writing mini biographies. So I also did it with Tim Noakesmith, who co-founded Val, and Neem Sullivan, who founded Infix Creative Studio. And from there, I just kept writing more and more with the people that I interviewed. And the first focus was improve my writing because I've always been someone who likes writing. And I try to write these founder stories, not so much like a direct interview that just focused on whatever they've built, but really focus on them as a person and tell their story, from their earliest dream when they're just a kid, right? And over time, you see that the interesting thing is a lot of people have these huge dreams when they're children. And when I interview the founders who have actually created a company, a lot of those dreams that they had as kids are still related to whatever they've been building. It could be wanting to solve a problem just when you're a kid, just wanting to solve problems for the people around you. It could be reaching billions of people across the world, like just by having those dreams as a kid, which I think most people do. The interesting thing is how people's lives have been drawn in a way which actually connects to those dreams and shows how they've actually fulfilled those dreams in some way. Because, yeah, a lot of people have these dreams and just never act on them. So that's what I've been delving into with the mini biographies. And then I also started writing on LinkedIn at the same time. I would post sometimes like the teasers or like snippets of what the blog would be about on LinkedIn, and that would lead people to reading the blog on my website. And then later on, as I was continuing to write like certain just thought pieces of my own and reflections, introspections of my own on LinkedIn, which sometimes would also turn into blogs, I decided to become a bit more consistent with the interview format. So writing those mini biographies can take a couple weeks to get it to a point where I'm happy to share. So in order to get something out once a week, I decided to do Q&As. So that would just be more of a written format that I would bring to people that I wanted to learn about their story. And they would be able to write the answers to my questions and tell their story in their own words. And that became the focus. And that's what I've been doing for about the last, I think, 10, 11 weeks, just putting out a Q&A every week. And over that time, as the Q&As take less time than writing the mini biographies, I've had some time to start building out the podcast and start recording a bunch of podcasts, which are very similar to the interviews that I was doing before, but it's just being recorded directly and shared directly instead of me writing a story about it afterwards. So, yeah, to explain what the evolution of the podcast has been, it's quite similar to what I've been putting out in blog form or in Q&A form, but now it's just being recorded and shared directly so people can watch it directly. And for my Q&A, I'm actually going to still keep that segment, but it's going to be a little bit different now. I'm going to use the podcast, like use key questions and key answers from the podcast and present that as a Q&A still. So people who prefer the written format, they may only have 1 or 2 minutes, a couple minutes to read something. They can still get that each week. But if they're interested in something that they read for 1 to 2 minutes and they want to hear the full story and see the person tell the story themselves, then they can tune into the podcast later on and see the full episode of whatever they read a Q&A about. So that's the plan moving forward.
Gotcha. So then, for the outcome of this podcast, because it's new, there's a lot of ideas, and you've obviously got big ideas for it. What would you say are your dreams for where the podcast would fit in this big vision of what you have at the moment?
Right. Okay. So in terms of my vision, how the podcast fits in with that is it does two main things. One of the main things is I get to chat to awesome people that I'm inspired by, learn about their story, learn about their habits and strategies. And then, so it's like a continuous cycle of learning with every person that I get to chat to on this podcast. But at the same time, the second part of it is that instead of just having those chats, recording it and tailoring the questions in a way where people can really learn something from it. So other people who tune into the podcast, people who have big dreams, can stop dreaming and start dream making, which is what I like to say. Like dream making is just chasing your dreams, putting action towards making your dreams into something that is achievable and not just something that you think about and fantasize about. So yeah, that's the sort of effect that fits into my own personal ambitions, being able to show people that their dreams are not that hard to reach. There's other people who may have similar dreams, may have faced similar struggles as you, but you know, this is how they've done it. This is their journey. These may be the mindsets they adopted along the way or the habits they adopted along the way. And it's something you can try for yourself. So, yeah, that's kind of where it fits in with my vision for the effect I want to have by doing this podcast.
Gotcha. So it's like basically bringing people from inaction to action, and that sort of anyone in that phase would be who this podcast is for.
Yeah. So I can be relevant for people in different areas of life as well, because for people who've never started something and want to, and they have big dreams, absolutely. But then for people who have tried things, be they've run into issues, they could have tried starting a certain business, or maybe they tried making a YouTube channel, tried writing a song, tried going into acting, whatever it is, they have lost the motivation or don't really have a clear path of, it is to reach their goals. And by seeing how other people have done similar things, my hope is that they see that and they feel inspired to try again, even if they have tried before in the past and haven't been able to achieve it. Or they could use some of the actionable advice that different guests provide and put that into action and give it a go to going again. So yeah, it's not just for people who have never tried or started anything. It's also for people who, I guess, need that bit of motivation, need that inspiration to see how other people have done it, directly have actionable things they can try after listening to the podcast, if it works for them.
Sure, that makes good sense as well. So then you've had many people on the podcast already, and if that's your vision, then I think the best way to prove its concept is to ask you if you were to choose one interviewer you've had who's helped you to make your dreams, who would it be?
Right. I think that the one of the people, one of my past guests that have inspired me the most by everything they've achieved is yeah. So she's actually a podcaster herself, and she had like the number two ranked careers podcast in Singapore, Malaysia. Obviously, a huge podcast. It's called "So This Is My Why," and yeah, her story was awesome. She was a lawyer for almost 10 years, but quit law and started basically doing a podcast. And she spent a year of yes, where basically for 1 year she would say yes to anything that came up, anything that excited her. Um, and it could involve like traveling to different countries, climbing mountains, like all sorts of crazy things, really experiencing life. And I guess it really ties in with that ex-vicarious mindset, because whole year, anything that excited her at all, she just did it. Didn't have to think twice about worrying about what the effects would be, just like giving it a go, just experiencing life. And like the podcast has been featured on with James Corden. Like she's interviewed so many different billionaires, like people who founded the biggest companies, a lot of Olympians, even people from Singapore's secret society. Like she's interviewed like such a wide range of people. But yeah, at the same time, like the podcast is not the only thing that she does. Yeah, she's like on a bunch of different boards as well. And it's just really impressive to see. I guess she's used the podcast as a vehicle for inspiring other people and interviewing really impressive people from all different industries and all different walks of life, and still be able to do all these other things, whether it be like starting other companies, helping people build a personal brand, as he's one of the LinkedIn top voices as well. So yeah, it's just what inspires me is her ability to do so many things that bring fulfillment to her and do them well. And yeah, so I mean, like if you guys list for the listeners out there, if you haven't read her Q&A, I reckon it would be a great read for you.
Awesome. So then, who can we expect to see in the near future on the podcast? Can we get a sneak peek at all?
Right. So in terms of like specific guests, I'm not going to name drop anyone, but with the podcast I've had, I'll tell you like the industries that they're from, because a big focus of Ex Vicarious is that I don't want to focus on any particular industry. I want to show that people from any aspect of life or people with any sort of dreams can make their dreams come true. So see people who have been featured in Forbes 30 under 30 speakers, people who have started million to $1 billion companies. You'll also see some really big creators and even people who have directed music videos for some of the biggest hip hop artists in Australia. Yeah, that's like a little taste of, I guess, type of people that you'll see on the podcast. I won't drop any names yet, but I'm sure you get to listen to all of them soon.
Awesome. So it's going to be a broad range, and don't get any teasers at all. So we'll stay tuned for when it
Yeah,
drops.
I think they will be dropped alongside this podcast. So once this drops, you guys can check out the other podcasts and see the guests for yourself.
Sweet. Is there anything else you want to talk about in particular on ex-vicarious?
So yeah, I guess apart from interviewing people and seeing what their stories are, seeing what their habits are, I guess spreading this philosophy that whatever you want in life, you can get it if you use the right sort of mindsets and habits to get there. That's sort of what I want to explore with each episode. So really enforce the idea that it doesn't matter what your dream is. It's I'm not just trying to help people who are founders or just people who want to into a creative scene or creative art. It's literally whatever your dream is. That's going to be reflected by the guests and the diversity of their dreams and their ambitions, and showing how everyone has a unique path to it, and whatever path seems like one that you'd want to go down, well, like here's some insight into it and here's how you can get started. So that's what I will be trying to explore, I guess, episode through interviewing different people and talking about their stories.
All right.
All right,
That's all
well,
the questions I had. Is
okay,
there anything else otherwise that you'd want to talk on?
for now, but I do want to ask you a couple questions first, just to explore who you are. So I guess last thing, Jeff, tell people what you're studying now and why.
Yeah. So I'm studying med at UNSW, and it was what felt right at the time of end of high school. I thought it'd be something really worthwhile committing my time to, something where I can help people, and it felt like a safe choice at the time in terms of like my future. And alongside med, which I'm studying now, I'm currently running a chemistry program for HSC students across New South Wales. So those are the two things I'm sort of working on at the moment.
Okay. And in terms of your chemistry that you're doing right now, can you tell us a little bit about that? How you sort of started that and what effect you want to have with it?
Yeah, so the program is Catalyst Chemistry, and it's a fully online chemistry program, which I sort of started last year. I've tutored chemistry for about 4 years now, and it's always been something I really enjoyed, actually teaching students and helping them to get the marks that they dream of. But I would say the reason that I started it, truthfully, was because I moved out of home last year to go study in Coffs Harbour for a year in med, and I needed a way to pay rent. So I thought, what better way than to try turn something I really enjoy doing into something a little bit bigger, and that's sort of where it started.
Yeah. And what was the sort of mindset, I guess, or what sort of things did you do to make it into a business where you actually have, tutors or other people marking for you than just doing one-on-ones? Because I get of other people I know who do tutoring, they just do one-on-one.
Yeah, so it was sort of a process of reaching capacity last year. I could only take on so many students one to one, and I just knew that I wanted to reach more students. So the only way to do so was to start moving into a model that still respected the tailored nature of tutoring in a small class setting. And the best way that I could think of was to start doing it myself, taking on a few students at the same time, but still keeping it personalized, and over time bringing on tutors who I really truly believe in as quality teachers and training them up to do something similar to what I've been doing the last year. And that's sort of where we're at the moment, where we're moving to a phase where there's a team building, and that's one of the problems I'm sort of struggling with at the moment, but it's something that I'm really enjoying working on.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I want to take it back now, actually ask you about what was the earliest dream you remember having that stayed with you to this day?
Earliest dream. Truthfully, I don't think I've ever been too big of a dreamer, and that's something I've been aware of for a long time. My dreams really don't have the longest horizon. Like, I'll dream of doing something for maybe a year or two, and that's sort of what I just tunnel vision and work on for that period of time. And whilst that sort of sounds bad, or there's no dream or bigger dream at the end of it all, I think it's important, and it's sort of guided what I've done super in a very concentrated way during that time. So for that 2 years, that is all I'm doing. But at the same time, there's not really a bigger vision that I've thought of from a younger age. The only thing that I've wanted to do when I was younger was pursue like professional tennis or professional football. But for a lot of boys, that would have been the same dream. And I think the reality of that set in sort of towards the end of high school.
Yeah. So in terms of like tennis, for example, or soccer, have you continued those sports? You're being full time and also building out catalyst chemistry.
Yeah, so it's been a bit of an alternation. Last year I was playing a lot more football. This year I've been playing more tennis. It's still definitely something I push myself to improve on constantly, but in the back of my mind, there's that element of, oh, it's just a dream to be playing there. And I remember when we talked with another mate of ours not too long ago, we were talking about that idea of a dream. And whilst realism is important, why not just do it? And I think there's a lot of fear if you were to pursue something that your chances of succeeding at are so small.
Hmm.
That's something that's really difficult to go after. And yeah, that's why I think that dream in particular, whilst it is a childhood dream and it's been one that I've had for a long time, hasn't really ever been taken seriously from in my mind.
Yeah. Do you think there is a time? Because obviously, right now, studying med full time, the tutoring business, you wouldn't have much time to focus on something like tennis. Do you think there is a time in the future where you would be able to put a lot more time into it?
I mean, I still dream of playing tennis overseas at some point, but I think definitely not at like an ATP level. That wouldn't be a reality. Maybe like at an older age, go to some like older age events, but I think the priority is currently in the career, and that's a choice that I've made.
Okay. Okay. So, the career, everything to do with studying med, I guess, have you found has been some of the biggest struggles with studying medicine, and what keeps you motivated to, on this path? Because it is one of the longer paths that you have to study for when you want to become a doctor and later on become a specialist. What's helped you stay motivated, keep performing at a high level with the difficulty of a subject like med?
I'd say it would be initially an intrinsic interest in science, but then also just the attachment of external validation through like good marks.
Hmm.
That's something that was really pushed into us growing up in like Sydney, and really having to get those marks to sort of have respect. And I think that's still lingering in my mind as something that great marks equals success. But I think that's starting to wane, and the what's driving my purpose is starting to shift more into what actually interests me. And in particular, last year going to Coffs Harbour, really actually seeing what med was like in a hospital setting properly. I think understanding that the profession is there as something where you commit yourself to serving other people and making sure they're looked after as people and their health is maintained. I think that's what more drives me to pursue med these days rather than that attachment to marks. So seeking out experiences uh, that keep providing that motivation, that's more important now than ever before. I would say that's probably what's driving me.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And that passion, that drive to other people get better, has been motivating you throughout this time. Like, how did that actually come about for you?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because I think I attach a quote to this. It's every something. It's not a perfect quote, but something along the lines of every mentor had a mentor at some stage, and the idea that it stems from me getting mentored from a younger age. I remember my dad organized some early coaching meetups with like life coach early on when I was younger, and I really hated it because I was like, well, I don't need this. It wasn't until later on where I really sort of understood why he was doing that, and that ingrained the idea of needing to pass that on to people, even though I'm not qualified at all yet to do anything like that. But the idea of trying to bring other people up to where you are, at least that can be something that you do and doesn't have to be a huge impact, but as long as you can help people get a little bit closer to their dream, that's sort of the idea that was attached to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty interesting. So, how old were you when you had the first session with a life coach?
Oh, it was like 17. It was only a few sessions. And I remember it was a Canadian lady from a totally different time zone. So my dad made me wake up at like 7 a.m. It was so it was grim at the time. But it was really small things, which in hindsight actually probably had a bigger impact than I thought. Things like just being grounded in the moment, even breathing techniques. I remember she taught me how to do box breathing. And I thought it was, again, so stupid at the time. But
Mm.
things like that,
So,
just, yeah,
what exactly is box breathing?
it's where you imagine a box in your mind, and then as you're breathing in and out, you're tracing across the lines on the box, and it
Right.
just helps you to relax and stay grounded in the moment. I think that helped with sport at the time,
Mhm.
and I don't use it as much now, but just having the idea of small things having a bigger impact than you perceive, I think that was the big idea I took from those sessions.
That's really cool. I wanted to jump back to, early on in your life, things that you've wanted to achieve. I know you said you usually have that 1 to 2 year window where you go full steam ahead, fully focus on those
Mm.
goals. Have you ever encountered barriers every time you've tried to achieve one of those goals in those 1 to 2 year periods? Has there been any strategies or any things you've done different that's helped you accomplish those barriers?
I think the biggest barrier is just having no understanding of new things because at our age everything is basically new, right? As your podcast is new and your blog was initially new,
Yeah.
just learning things initially and pushing myself to learn things for the first time was probably the biggest barrier. But having tried and failed a few things, like for example, I had a Spotify playlist, like sort of mini business, and that came and went over a period of a year. And then there was a tennis coaching, came and went for a period of maybe 2 years as well. The lessons you learn along the way of trying and failing in those things makes the next project faster, better, and it removes those initial obstacles that you had. So I'd say just like understanding how to set things up initially, how to talk to people, how to make something that actually helps people. I think that was a big barrier as well. Understanding that at the end of the day, that's what work is for. If you're making an impact and helping someone else, then you can be compensated for that. And that was a big understanding that sort of shifted in the last few years.
Yeah. So there's two things I want to follow on from that. First was the Spotify playlist. I wanted to actually ask you a little bit
Mm.
more about that, how that came to be, because before Jeff and I met, for everyone listening here, that's actually the thing that connected us. For yourself, just could you go into a little bit about your passion for creating those playlists, started and was meant to you?
Yeah. So I was actually I was going to jump in when you was talking about it earlier, but it was exactly the same thing. Like I really enjoyed making these playlists with my favorite music that I thought other people would enjoy as well, and organizing them in a nice way. I remember like I would literally have playlists that were like color coded and all this extra stuff, but it was initially just making stuff that I liked, and then realizing that, oh, hang on, if I like this, probably someone else out there might like it as well. And over time, it sort of just built up doing the same sort of things that you did, making the playlist name optimized, the description optimized, and then making it into something that was nice to listen to.
Yeah,
And over time, it built up, and then somewhere along the way, I found your music and put it on because I liked it. And I think it was very early. It was like maybe 10K, even maybe even less when it started.
yeah.
And now what's it sitting at? Like 200, 300K,
Oh,
somewhere
my
around there.
song or your playlist?
Your song,
Oh,
not
it's
my
yeah,
playlist.
it's like 300K ish, something like that.
Yeah, and that's awesome.
Yeah, well, I mean, like on that point, that just goes to show how much the playlist has helped my song. Like I was talking about getting that feedback by putting yourself out there. This is, I guess, the examples where Jeff and I had never talked before because he had added my song to his playlist, which had how many hours did it have at the time, roughly?
Oh, like it would have been a couple hundred, not that many.
Yeah, but it definitely went into the thousands pretty quickly, I
Mm.
think. And yeah, that actually kickstarted the momentum for my song getting streams because Spotify algorithm, I get a lot more people listening to it, and then pushed it to like the Spotify playlist, like Release Radar and these different algorithmic playlists where it ended up getting more views. So like, just thank you for that, Jeff. Thank you for all those years back in the day, adding it to your playlist. It's pretty interesting how we never actually talked until a couple years after that, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah, not
the
at
song's
so.
been on there for a good few years as well.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember when I first like heard it and added it. I remember speaking to some friends about it from our circles loosely connected, and I remember people saying like, "Oh, what is this? I don't like." It was kind of cringe or whatever.
Hmm.
And I just remember listening and being like, "Well, I actually don't mind. I actually quite like this song." And I think it's just a case of like, if you put yourself out there and there's something you truly like and believe in, you're always going to find other people who resonate, even if there's lots of people who don't.
Hmm.
And I think that's just so awesome about how it panned out.
Yeah, I think whenever you put yourself out there for anything at all, there's always going to be people who hate, and there's a lot of different reasons why they may hate. But at the end of the day, if it fulfills you and you know something that you can have an impact on the people who do like it, then no reason to focus on the negativity is only reason to focus on the positivity. Yeah, I mean, I want to go now back to one of the other points you said before, where through your mindset shifts, I guess, learn how to talk to people. So I just want to like delve deeper into the experiences and like what exactly did you mean by that? Like what sort of changes came to to a wider range of people?
Yeah. I would I'll start by saying I would consider myself an introvert. So I still would say I've been shy for a long time, but that's something I've worked on for a long time. I think the shift started probably after leaving high school. High school was very much a bubble, and going into tennis coaching was probably where it started. That was my sort of passion project for a good period of a year, 2 years, and ended when I moved out of home because I couldn't keep up with those same students. But speaking to just parents being of a completely different age range, different backgrounds, just speaking to all different types of people and trying to be on side, personable, showing that you care. I think that was one of the important things as well that helped me to get to where I was with the tennis. I think those were the shifts at the time. And then moving to Coffs Harbour again, just a completely different range of people to talk to and learn about their experiences. So I think the mindset shift was turning around that time, maybe 2 years ago, to speaking to as many different types of people as possible will equip you with the skills to talk to whoever in the future. And I think that's something I'm still working on, obviously, but that was the mindset shift.
Yeah. So what's helped you to people who in the past you may have found more intimidating? Like, is there certain things, it's a catch up that you're going to have with them or like a networking event that you come across? And is there certain things you kind of self beforehand to make it more comfortable for yourself to like to some new people?
Yeah, I would say doing due diligence and just actually taking an interest in their background and understanding what kind of value they could provide to you specifically will make the conversation just so much more valuable. If this is in a networking perspective,
Hmm.
it would be just actually showing that you're not just another person who's just like in their inbox just wanting to network, but actually asking them to help you with what you're doing or trying to help them with what they're doing as well. That's another way you can to sort of flip the script in a way. But I think just actually, yeah, to summarize, just actually care.
I think that's really interesting because I personally had the same sort of struggles. Where I think intrinsically, like deep down, I'm more of an introvert. So to put yourself out there in certain situations, it's definitely doesn't feel super natural sometimes, and it's try, as you said, like actually care about how you can help them, or opening up a conversation with them sometimes. And yeah, that's interesting. It does make a lot of sense how caring is something that is a more powerful force than nervousness or anxiety for talking to someone new, because I guess care, then it's something that takes control of where your mind is at, and suddenly the nerves aren't the ones that are pulling the strings. So yeah, that's a really interesting point.
Hmm.
um,
And I think just expanding on that idea of caring, I think that carries across to the way that I treat the things that I do.
mm,
So with chem tutoring, for example, whilst it's not world changing, and I'm well aware of that, I think the most important thing that has helped me help students over the last 2 years, and I do get feedback each term, each year, is just actually showing an interest in the student success outside of whatever it is they're doing in school as well. Like it could just be a more holistic understanding that they're maturing, becoming 18, turning 17, 18, getting to that point in life where they actually have to start forming their dreams as well. And having just that extra little bit of care, I think I've always been that type of person to want to go the extra mile. I think that's really important for whatever you do really in life.
yeah, I mean, just knowing a little bit about Catalyst and knowing how you've created a community, from just getting like TikToks and Instagram videos where you actually go through questions. The speed run segments are my favorite. But yeah, apart from just creating those communities where people can comment and the questions out for themselves, get active feedback from you, you've created a Discord as well, where you go into deeper topics and have a deeper connection with the people in that group and help them not just about chemistry, but also ways to study and all that. But I actually want to hear you speak on that a little bit more for the listeners out there who may be considering studying chemistry or already are in chemistry. Tell them a little bit about how to help them as a tutor or just through Catalyst.
Yeah, so Catalyst Chemistry is online, which is a different sort of new idea for a lot of people, and for a lot of people that's a deal breaker, and I understand. But the idea is that we maintain the personable aspects of a one-to-one tutoring approach. It should never be a big class where you keep your classes small and you make sure that each individual has their needs catered for, whether it's in the actual sessions or after the sessions. We've actually shifted over from Discord to Google Classroom. It just helps, makes everything a bit more centralized. But just having things like post session support where you can ask questions whenever, or you have personalized feedback on your marking whenever you need it, or help with your depth study when you need it. Those kinds of things benefit our students the most, where they just get that little extra 10% over their peers. And more on that, the whole message of Catalyst Chemistry is doing it faster. So we help you to crush chemistry faster than if you were just doing it on your own, or if you went with just a one-to-one tutor. So it's paced faster than your school pace. You learn everything before you step in the classroom. And that level of confidence is what really just drives your results term on term. So I'd say those are the ways that we could help you best. And if you're interested, obviously you can reach out to us at Catalyst Chemistry, either on Instagram or on our website.
Yeah, awesome. And I'll put all the links in the show notes afterwards for people to reach that. I just want to jump to two questions that I'm going to ask every guest for this podcast. And the first one was, if you have to live your life through the words of one quote, what would that quote be?
I've never been a big quote rememberer, but I would just say that the path will reveal itself as you walk along it. And I think that sort of carries my idea of dreaming just for the next 2 years is, whilst it could be seen as limited, if you really focus on those 2 years, the next 2 years will show themselves to you by the time you get to the end of that path. So I think just following what you truly believe in for the moment and then trusting that the next steps will appear themselves.
I really like that. And the second question was, if you could reach everyone in the world for 30 seconds, what would you say to them?
I don't think I'm qualified to speak to everyone, but I'll speak to those who are younger than me or at a stage of life similar to me as well. I would just say that I don't think that anyone has a lack of potential and everyone has the same potential to be successful. The problem isn't necessarily who you are, it's just who you think you are. And the moment you can think you're someone else or you're going to be something, that's when you can start to make noise and get to whatever you're trying to do. You don't have to be the top 0.0000001% of people, but as long as you can start to show up for yourself, make promises to yourself that you keep and keep moving forward day by day, I think that's where you'll start to believe.
Yeah, I love that. And I do think that people, not just the same age or below, but people above, people a bit older as well, can take a lot from that. So really love that, Jeff. Thank you for taking the time today. We should definitely use more often. I feel like a lot of the chats that we have when we're having a chat with other mates together as well, some really interesting stuff that I think a lot of people could benefit from when we record and share it. So yeah, would love to have you back, and thank you so much for coming on and not only pushing me to do the podcast, but actually helping me introduce it to everyone else today.
Awesome. No, thank you so much for having me on. And obviously, this is mostly about starting up this podcast, but it's genuinely something that can help you get from where you are now to where you want to be. And whether it's something small, just taking an idea each time you listen, or whether you actually follow through and do the things that all these successful people that Braith are interviewing are actually doing, it can make a really big impact in what you do. So thanks once again for having me on and keen to hear what's to come.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. See you later.